All right, we are at the Articulation Games round 3, and the premise today is, coming from my PE background, is you have a group of students, a certain age group that you pick, and then you have a certain sport that you pick because that's the venue in which physical education generally rides. And the idea is that you have to use the sport to get at an underlying movement quality. So it's the submersive, like how do we get these little beings to learn about themselves throughout the context of this game that they want to play and think they should be playing. So you have Jenn Pilotti here, and she chose elementary and soccer. I don't know anything else yet. I'm assuming it has to do something with the feet, but elementary soccer. And what is your idea, Ms. Pilotti?
Well, I would like to preface this by saying I am assuming that I'm allowed to do whatever I want.
Yes.
So this may or may not fly in actual PE, but in my world, I thought this was a fantastic idea. So
yeah, mostly nobody cares. So go for it. Nobody comes into the gym. It is the dark side, like in The Lion King, where the light doesn't touch. There's nobody in there except they're just like, they're fine. Put more kids in there.
So we're going to be out on the grass, and the first thing we're going to do is some somersaults. And you're going to do somersaults backwards, and you're going to do somersaults forwards. See what way you like to somersault. If you can't quite figure out how to somersault forward and back, see if you can just figure out a way to make the shape of a somersault. There's no right or wrong here. So the kids are going to start with some somersaults.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm going with this, and I'm thinking you have a kid, and let's say it's elementary. So let's take it easy on you. Let's say there's 20 kids.
Okay.
And you have a kid who simply cannot do it and is getting frustrated, almost to the point of upset. The other kids aren't necessarily noticing because they're kind of doing their thing. Right. But one is really frustrated. How do you manage that between the 19 other kids?
I'm going to come over to this kid that's frustrated and say, okay, are you comfortable lying on your back on the grass? And can you get down there? And if this child can get on the grass on the back, say, great. Can you just rock a little bit forward and back? And if that's going okay, say, great, we're going to just add one more thing as long as it's okay. If it's not, we'll stop there. If it's okay, I want you to rock all the way up to a sitting position and then all the way back. And that's it. That's perfect. And you're doing a great job. And if that gets to be easy for him, we'll take it a step further, but I suspect that's probably enough for this slightly overstimulated child at this point in time.
Yeah, and that's I dig that, and it's funny. It's like, yeah, rocks and rolls. You give them the step where they can include themselves, and they could do a piece of it, which is huge.
Exactly. So they feel like they're successful in some way, shape, or form, right? All right. Yes. So then the next thing we're going to do is we have soccer balls lined up. So we're doing just midfield, and halfway across the midfield, we have soccer balls lined up. So what I want, we're going to have them lined up. And so if we have 10 kids, let's say we have 5 lines of 4 kids. And we have 4 balls. So you're going to run to your ball. When you get to your ball, you're going to do a somersault, and then you're going to stand up and keep going. And if you can't somersault, no big deal. Just do that little rock pattern up. Keep going.
Okay. Kids 4 and 8 pick up the ball and start running with it, and then they start throwing it at each other. What is do you allow that to happen? And the kids are watching, they're like, is this okay? Like, can we also so snapshot.
So if you pick up the ball and you start running with it, that's not okay. That means you have to sit out the next time you run across the field and do a somersault.
Okay
Have to have some boundaries.
Okay, fair. See, I would have been like, let's see what happens. All right. So you have to like wrestle on the ground and roll. Like I would totally see it in my world, because I you don't fight them, because it just creates this. And I would literally attempt to roll with it, but I like it. You're like, nope, little beings, now you're gonna sit out, and that's punishment. And they're probably like,
because that age wants to move around, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah,
like
yeah.
you don't want to
Sure.
like
And they want to be, I'm probably taking a high school brain and like putting it in these little tiny bodies just because it's so fair. But I like it. I like that the boundary lines. It's good.
Yes. Once we've got that down, we're going to add one more step. So now you're going to run to the ball, do a somersault, kick the ball, and keep running.
Okay. So I'll act as that. Are you demoing this or is it all verbal?
It's all, well, depends on if it seems like they're getting it or not. Because I want them to come up with their own way to do it. So I don't want them to like feel like they have to do it my way, right?
Yeah, because I'm trying to figure, like, cause I'm thinking about the space between the body and the ball. And like,
yes.
are they attempting to do the like the ball is in front of them enough so that they could start the somersault, come up and then make the kick?
That would be ideal.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. But you know, they'll figure like, and the thing is, usually I've found, because I've worked with this age group before, children will kind of figure it out. If it's not working, they're like, wait, the ball's behind me. And then I might give them some feedback. Just say, well, what happens if you stop sooner and do your somersault?
Okay, very cool.
Yeah. And that is actually how we are going to start to approach soccer.
I'm curious, what was the idea of the somersault? Like, where is it just literally like ground body stuff that's intriguing enough for a small child?
So there's that. And it's also when they come up from the somersault to kick the ball, it's going to keep them low. So it's going to keep them running in a more squatted position versus coming up and trying to like, yeah, exactly. And to be a little more successful at kicking, you're going to want to stay a little lower. So that was where the somersault idea came from.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. And I thought it would be a fun way to start to approach like, running and kicking.
And so when you said, and that is our approach to soccer, like the question is, so you've got a half hour left, like, do you have all the rest of this in mind? Or did it kind of like, they do this fun warm up and then they kick the ball?
They do this fun warm up and then they kick the ball. And then maybe we start to do like, what happens if we have 10 of the kids on one side and 10 of the kids on the other? And can they do the same drill and not run into each other?
So
I thought there were
some chaos.
Yeah, exactly. And some interaction because children like interaction with their peers, and then kind of see how that morphs. I like you. I like seeing where kids take things. I think it's always really interesting. And I might even give them permission, can you make up a game using this idea? So you have to somersault and kick the ball, but can you make up a game where you're playing with each other and not hurting each other with this idea?
It's funny. I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about it because the one thing for me that I have issue with, and this is always like, and like I look at a park and there's like 50 kids at the park and like 45 of them are in line. And I'm like, I understand that this is organized for adults, but like all this waiting, like why in my brain is like, why is this occurring? So it could be, so I think about, so if I take your idea, so in the beginning, there was these like 4 lines of 5.
Yeah.
And so like, if the first thing, because in the somersaults, there wasn't any, they were all doing it like at once.
At the same time,
there wasn't
totally.
Any, right.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking like, if I was in that situation, if I would use like lines on the pitch or the field, or if I would use cones, like, I almost wonder if I'm taking this idea, instead of having them do lines, then I just have them, and it's almost like this, I'm thinking of the idea of staying low. They have these set of cones and each kid has a cone and they're all starting on a line, but again, it's 20 going at the same time. And can you do that somersault, get up and tap the cone, right? This idea of
like
staying
that.
low.
Yeah.
And then like you have them set up, and then if they can, then those kids get a ball on their cone. So now we have certain, and
like
this is just my brain. And so like they know like, oh, okay, to progress, I need a ball on the cone and I need to do a summer. So this way, and you could like see, but you don't have to you don't have to micromanage kids, and everybody thinks
right.
you do.
Right.
So this idea like, okay, you could do it, like, here's the ball. And I almost would be like, and now you have a ball there and you can do whatever you want with that ball. And then while that's happening, you're working with the ones who are still struggling to get the somersault. So then I might be like, okay, you're going to lie on the ground and you're going to roll laterally, because kids can roll laterally.
Usually and then they do. Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Okay.
But yeah, and it's again, it's elementary. So they don't really have any of it. Because I mean, if we tried this in a high school, unless you are at the same and you have a real good rapport, they're all just going to be looking at each other. Like
100% self-conscious. Like, I don't know how to get on the ground in somersault. Like, that's not something that I do. Whereas, I don't know, in my experience, like with my nephews, below the age of 10, you start asking them to do floor step. They think it's great. They're like, this is fun. Yeah. Like, you know, so. And
it is an interesting, I really do think middle school is that, like, personally, and I haven't taught middle school, and there's a reason I haven't taught, because the kids are like real clingy in middle school. I'm just like, yeah. But that is where you go from PE is everything to now PE is sports or fitness. So this like giant funnel occurs. And it's also where like you have kids that start to love PE and hate PE happens. Because again, it's about the thing. It's about, can you run? It's about now, can you, how are your push-ups? How flexible are you? So now you start asking comparative questions and like, why are you bad at, like, I'm bad at this sport, which in their mind at that time, when they're all looking for acceptance, like, okay, I'm bad. Oh, I'm bad at PE. Now I hate PE and my body's bad and I'm not. Yeah.
Which I think is a tragedy. So yeah.
Yeah. And it's weird because, you know, I also think about in myself, I think about the hypocrisy of, well, that's where the problem is. And it's like, but I don't want to do that. Right. Like, I don't want to deal with middle schoolers. So, you know, I kind of like invert that by saying when they get to high school, I'm going to try to undo that. But it, you know, if I was, again, really in the trenches, I would be like, I need to be at the middle school. And then, because if that's what middle school is, then it's even more of a quote unquote fight, because that's what everybody in middle school does. Like, that's what everyone thinks the role is to start to siphon. So if there's a class that doesn't siphon and like continues that elementary, everything is go, then there's this like butt of heads, job wise and peer wise. So yeah, it's a wild kind of a thing. And I'm sorry if I had tangented. Did you, other than like the somersaults and then you like the kid, they get up, they kick the ball. When they are kicking a ball, is it anything goes? Are you just like turning them loose?
Anything
free
goes.
reign.
Free reign. Yeah. Yeah. Because I feel, I feel like often we try to give kids too much instruction for that stuff. Yeah. And there's so much value in letting them try to figure it out, you know, because then you could change the game and see how far you can kick the ball, see how not far you can kick the ball. You've got all these different things you can play with within like this idea of kicking the ball, right?
Yeah. And then you could also notice like, okay, like who plays with another kid, who takes the ball and goes off on their own, because the truth of the matter is, like, even in elementary, which is what, through 10, 11?
Yeah,
so
11.
Through that age, some of these kids and people in PE, right? Some of these kids have been playing AAU for 5-6 years.
Right.
So in part of like in that, you know, and it's wild because, you know, you have this body stuff, anything goes. We're going to try it this way. And the truth of the matter is, you're probably going to get 2 or 3 kids is like, why are we doing this? Like, you're even going to get like, and, you know, if you were to phrase it like in their little athlete mind as this is just a different type of warm up. You're like, when you get knocked on the ground, this is going to happen. You're going to get tripped and kicked. Like, how do you get back up? Then they'd probably be like, okay, that makes sense. But if you were to simply be like, just for the fun of it, in their little trained mind, like, we're wasting time. They're like, I can already do these tricks. I can already dribble through these cones. So it is a really wild day and age that we're living with. And there's like, and such a gap between the kids, even at that age, that you really do have to do a lot of like observing and manipulating and like what's going on here. I get the other thing is if I were to, okay, so you're going to do a soccer unit, right? This idea of like, we're going to focus. And when I say soccer, a soccer ball's going to be involved. Like that's literally it, right? Like that's the only same thing in basketball. A basketball's going to be involved. Let's say it's going to be a 3-week unit.
Okay.
Let's say, so that's 15 days. So I'm curious, in your scheme of things, is this a day 1 thing? Is this a day 5 thing? How would you kind of line this up?
This would probably it'd be early. It'd be either between days 1 and 3.
Okay. And let's say the kids can roll. The kids can all do this. Mm-hmm. So let's say it's day 3. What would day 4 look like?
Well, we'd need to build upon that in some way, shape, or form. So I would probably give them another ground movement up into a run to the soccer ball that just looked a little different.
Okay.
So rather than somersaulting this time, we're going to go from a kneeling position to a sprint to the ball.
Okay.
And once you get to the ball, you're going to kick the ball. And again, then maybe we'd start to play with accuracy with the kicks a little bit,
Okay.
Can you get the ball to this cone? Can you get the ball, to this person?
Okay. Let's go. So let's play into, because when you see these pockets of populations and pockets of like natural tendencies, in a way, you kind of have to play to each one of them. You can't just ignore, like, the kid that's by himself just doing, like, you never want to just be like, oh, he's fine. Like, you always want to give time and attention and support to each one that's going on. So let's say that of these 20, there are, let's do how do I make it hard? So it's not even an even number, Jen. It's 5 kids. 5 kids are on this AAU team, and they all know each other. And you notice that they really come alive with competitiveness. So how might you either take this future drill or the drill how might you start to make it a bit more competitive to acknowledge that side of the young people?
This is fair. Well, I feel like the accuracy is going to be competitive in and of itself, because often kids will, the way kids talk to each other. I made 3 of those. How many did you make? Okay. I was only able to get 2 of those. So that kind of starts to breed some of that. I could also split the kids that wanted, and I could phrase it, if you want to play more of a game style, we'll split you up over here. If you want to keep working on this, you can stay over here. And I could also do it that way, which might work really well in that situation. 20 is a manageable number. I don't know how you all do it.
Absolutely. And it's like, it's also, I know, there's like, let's double that. And I know there are people that triple that. And I'm just like, holy Jesus. But the asterisk there is that you have enough space to allow. And again, I'm coming from a place when I think of the high school and then the middle schools and stuff where I'm at, that there is enough space, but in the, where you could do it. And I really do think that is where true physical education would be, is when you have this group, but they are all working at their own level, at their own thing. So it isn't like, well, we all have to play a soccer game now. And those 5 are just like, watch me go. And the other ones are just like spinning and like, I don't, that kind of round.
Like doing, cartwheels or picking the daffodils. Totally.
And I love too the different, because my brain is so trained for like conditions and like how to like, so I was thinking of the competitive, because the questions I asked you, I've already answered in my head. Like, I was like, but I think about, so let's say that you've got, and in this scenario, let's say that we're even going for the cone tap, the thing that instead of 20 in a line and then 20 cones in front, 2 kids on either side would have a cone, or 2 kids so I go this way, 2 kids on the same line instead of over here. Now it's first one to get to the cone.
Ooh.
Right. So they're starting in the same place. And in this one, right, they're kind of coming at each other. And then from there, I could even do that group of 5, spread them out further. Now there's 5 around the cone. First one, not even first one to pick it up. So now they have to do that somewhere, and then they have to grab it. And all of a sudden it becomes like cutthroat. And then and I'm also the person that I wouldn't be like, no, you can't touch. I'd be like, let's see how physical they get. Let's see where they go.
Yeah.
But I really, or if I think of physicality, let's say one has to protect the cone so he's like, he or she, gosh, so sexist. He and or she is like, I hate this because this happens all the time. Like I'll be talking to kids and I'll like say he, and I'm just like, it could be a girl, like as a girl, I'm like, oh, but like, so I think about like ground, he has to protect it, like from others trying to take it one or other.
Oh, I like that. So, almost like a goalie sort of situation.
Yeah. And this idea like, okay, but you can't touch it. And then there could be certain rules. Like if I wanted them to use like the roll, they can't be on their hands or feet. Like their hands or feet can't touch the ground. But constraints, it's really kind of all it is.
Yeah. And there's so much you can do with constraints with a somersault, for instance, which is cool.
I like that you started with this concept, which is, as we know through a Darien bar, like this idea of like getting low and staying low as like a super important thing to lock into. Was there anything else that came to mind that kind of played with that concept?
It was when I was in Europe, I was watching a football game, and it was super interesting because there were a couple of guys that went up for the ball, one got knocked, and he did a backward somersault. And I was like, I wonder if anybody taught him that or just knows how to do that. And then later in the game, something similar happened, and it wasn't quite a backward somersault, but it was like and then they immediately got up and went for the ball. And I was like, this is super interesting, this somersault thing. So, body control. And then on top of it, the staying low, because when I first saw the prompt, I was like, oh, I want to teach the kids how to stay low, because that's trained out of them so quickly. So it was kind of the combination of the two,
it's interesting though, soccer too. And I'm watching the World Cup, and I'm like watching their feet and how much they get like knocked over and tripped, and how to like not. So like part of me in my mind is like, in trying to simulate, like you do the roll, you get up, you just start running as fast as you can. And then when you hear the whistle, like you got to get to the ground as fast as you can. And
I like that.
So what does that, because again, it's a competition. So like, do they just lay out? Do they crumple? Do they just take a seat? And like, just to watch how that unfolds, I think would be really, really neat.
I like that.
I've also seen in some kind of, I don't know when, some kind of soccer warm up where like, how people like celebrate with a chest bump. It was like I think it was like 2 grown men. And their job was they need to like jump in the air, hit each other, land, and then go after the ball. So it's just kind of like, I'm going to take contact, which I thought was also kind of neat, which could be another way kind of to set things up.
Yeah, I like that actually.
Let me give you some more prompts, some more like real life things. So it's day 8 and you get a new person in. And your new person is Marisol.
Okay.
And she does not speak the same language as you. Do you think about, well, I need to cover everything in these 7 days with this student. If you can't speak Spanish, how does that work out? Or in your mind, is it just like, bring them together? Like where she's here today, she could start with us. Where does your mind go? How would you kind of deal with that?
I would probably do the warm-up. I would repeat the warm-up from day 3. So we're going to somersault and run. And I would see how she did with that. And based upon that, I would determine what happened next with her.
Okay.
But I would try to integrate her kind of as fully as possible without repeating too many things, because kids get a little bit bored. They like to progress, Yeah,
and they don't want to be like this quote unquote the slow one.
Totally. Yeah.
And I think that's very interesting, and just the general idea, the perception of PE that, I don't know, we could just toss a kid. I mean, I've had a kid tossed in like the last 2 weeks of a school year.
Oh.
And so like, it really is like, we got to put them somewhere, like definitely PE, definitely, like they go for the electives. And so like they just like toss a kid in and like, as if there's like no regard or value of all the stuff we've been, because in most people's mind, all we're doing is playing. And well, that's easy to do. And it's just like, well, first of like, I'm curious as to what these elementary kids having COVID, like what their social skills are. Like, I'm super interested in like, will they interact with each other? Because they're probably, I would say at least half of them are probably just going to play with the ball on their own. If there's enough balls to do that. And if they don't have a ball, like, then what do they do? So this has to kind of go with equipment. So it's interesting, but if I go back to the student, so it's more of a, like, I'm just going to demonstrate and then, hope that they get it. Is that kind of the realm that you're taking?
Yeah. So like I said, the warm up would be kind of a repeat, something that was familiar to the rest of the kids, new for Marisol, because Marisol's never done it before. And if she seemed to be struggling, I would go over and I would give her, like I did with the little boy that was unable to do a full roll.
Yeah.
I would help break it down, give her some options via just demonstration.
Right.
Since, we have a language barrier. And then based on that, I would integrate her to the rest and see how it went.
Okay. No, I dig it. It would certainly be, if I'm coming from your shoes, that would certainly be the demonstrate and the acting out, like the acting out of everything. Again, it's because very much a theater class when the one resource you probably hadn't thought about is other kids are probably bilingual. Like
I did.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Because my nephew, my brother-in-law is Mexican. And so my nephews are all fluent in Spanish. And he's now 8, but when he was 6, he was the only kid in the class that spoke Spanish. And there was a child who was not bilingual. So he did all the interpreting. Yeah. And I don't know how he felt about it. Like, he's a sensitive child. So I don't know, like, if that was okay for him. So it was my initial go-to thought was pulling over another kid. But then I'm like, but is that fair to the child?
Yeah. And that's such an interesting concept. So background is that the school that I work with is 85% Hispanic. Tons and tons of, like, we have the most bilingual of anybody, like in the state of Oregon. Oh, wow. So there's definitely this kind of prong that happens where you have, and I'm not going to say it's generally girls, but let's say, I would say 60-40 in the kids who don't even need to be like, they like recognize a new kid is in, recognize that they have those eyes that have like, I don't know what you're saying, teacher. And they just kind of walk up, like they like automatically they walk on over and they start to play that interpreter role. And as you're just like, thank you, Jesus. Right. And so, and in that, it's such a wild thing. And I don't know if these kids were once the kids in their shoes, right? Or I don't know if that's the role they play in their family, but they get this kind of translator friend role. And so most of the time they don't like interpret and then walk away. Most of the time they interpret and they're like insta friends.
And they hang, totally.
Yes. Yeah. The other prong that happens, which I think probably is one of where your nephew is that they have done this their entire life and they don't want the responsibility of it. Well, so in that, and then, and when they don't want, like, it is like, yeah, absolutely respect what they're willing. So as a person, you just kind of watch and you recognize, and sometimes you're like, okay, I know these 3 kids speak Spanish. Like, maybe if I simply ask, and you'll see the reluctancy. But I think in my experience, when you try so hard, like you're like making up half Spanish words in your mind and you're like really acting. And like, when you really give it a try, and you see there's a disconnect, generally they might be like, oh, but then they'll, because they don't want the role forever.
Right.
And so, I, as long as that's communicated, it's like, hey, I recognize that that this is, thank you for that so much. I'm going to do my very best to, then they're like, I'm not going to be the go-to. And you make sure that the next time there's an issue that you don't ask them, and that you figure out a way. And you take the time. I think that's the other thing. Like, you take the time, you take the 5, 6, 7, while the kids are like doing whatever, or like watching you, they recognize this effort is being made.
Yeah.
And that they're not gonna like call on you to be the person. Then I think it becomes a much more, okay, she's really just gonna ask me when she really needs it. But there's a way to kind of get through. And also, like, in Marisol's eyes, like, she's in this role too. So she's like, okay, because there'll be so many times they really, really know how to body language. Yes, I understand. Like, really well. And so you'd be like they give you the signal, whether it's like see or like a shake, and you're like, okay, they got it. And then you like have them do their thing with like, and they generally have a buddy, and I just let that, and then you walk away and you're like, oh gosh, I didn't get it at all. But it's one of those things where like, and that's fine. Like, let them have their social interaction and let that continue. So it's great. It's interesting that you have this insight in your life and this experience. And that's the thing, right? If you have one person to pick from and one experience, you're going to assume that experience is kind of universal. So, and then it's like, if you have multiple, that's kind of the thing, is how do you have multiple experiences to get a breadth of, because again, you only know what you know. And that's that's the whole general thing of like, of teaching. And ideally what I think physical education is again, we want it to be more about ownership of your body and not about your ability to play the sport. Like, that's not your value.
Right.
I'm curious, do you have any further principles, if you will? I mean, you don't need to like outline a program about how you would treat elementary education. Like, what would be your guiding light if, and again, you're not a trained public educator. You're definitely an educator in different realms, but I think what really knocks coaches and movement teachers for a loop is when you get people in class who didn't sign up and don't want to be there. Like, how do you relate to that? What would be, I'm curious, what would be your guiding principle for what the purpose of the class would be?
Well, so interestingly, a little side note, I actually had a client sign his wife up for working with me. I assumed she was on board. I got on the call. She was pissed. She did not want to be there. She had no interest in what I had to say. I have not had this happen in a long time. And it's interesting.
But it's happened more than once.
It's happened more than once.
Oh,
because sometimes people think it's a great idea to get somebody and they schedule the appointment for them.
Huh.
Right?
They're like in bed and they just like bring the iPhone. They're like playing. Like, yeah. Like,
and then they tell it's usually significant others. Their significant other, oh, you have an appointment with Jenn next week or tomorrow or in an hour.
I'm flashing and I'm just like, we're gonna go to the park today. Like, it's just like a child thing. I'm like, don't you love the park? Or a dog? Anyway, sorry, I'm just getting the psychology behind it.
Totally. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, she's never gonna want to do that again. Somehow he convinced her to come again. And I started to kind of notice what she liked. And so I started to cater the session around that, while also being able to give her a little bit of what she needed. And at one point she had a thing going on. It was neck pain or something. And so she felt so much better after the session. That was like the final thing. She's like, okay, I'm going to keep doing it. I still see her. It's been 6 months since this all happened. But like, yeah. So anyway, long story about adults to come back to these children.
Humans are humans. Yeah.
Humans are humans. I would do the same thing. I would try to I would observe, and for whatever reason, and maybe you do this too, I tend to notice the person that is struggling the most. Like that is who my eyes go to. And that is who my helper being wants to like, you know, and wrap up and make life a little better for, right? So
which is funny. I was just a quick, which is funny because I think if I think maybe about kids who are looking for attention, who can, all of a sudden they're like, I also can't, like, and you like rush over, you know, I could see this like helplessness spread, and then I'd be like, oh crap, and then I'd just be like, figure it out. Yeah. And then like, oh, you got it. What did I, you know?
Yeah,
so
with lots of clapping. Yeah, like all the attention that they need, whatever. But yeah, I would notice like what resonated with them. Like, because children like to move at that age. So even if they don't want to move in the way that I'm offering, they're going to be moving in some way. Mm-hmm. So if I can tap into that and offer a lot, you know, consistent with whatever the drill is that we're doing, just offer a different variation that resonates more with that child, that's what I would do to try and, because you want that, like, that's the whole thing. I believe that if we want people to stay active their entire lives, we have to help them find movement that they like, not movement that they have to do.
Correct. Agree wholeheartedly.
So that would be my kind of shtick with elementary school students.
Okay, cool. And I also like your, let's see what they do with it, because that's burned out of them so quickly. No, like this. Like that line, no, like this is just like a slice of like, no, it's not about you and your way. Like it's about, can you follow this way? And then we wonder why we have robots that come up and what they're looking. And this is the same, you know, think about these kids going to adulthood. Let's say they do actually get into training. They're like, no, I want the exercises.
Yes.
I don't want the principles. I don't want the concepts. I don't want, like, I don't know if I should like this because I think it should hurt and I need it to be work. And I understand, like, so there is, I mean, we have to be careful. It starts so early.
Yes.
And the other thing, like thinking about this age when, and I think about my own experience, I think about like people I know, like when school is out specifically, like parents believe they need to put their kids in something in order, like that's how they love them, that's how they care for them, and they spend tons of money and they do tons of and the more they put, the more money, the more time, the more car rides, all that is like in their mind it's like stockpiling all this care. But I wholeheartedly believe at the heart of it, all this kid wanted was to play with you, and you weren't sure how to do that, you didn't have the energy for it, and you didn't have confidence in it, so you outsource that. And this is why we have AAU starting at 5 years old. And this, so it's a different, if kids could get on their bike and play, or if kids could just play in this communal space where there didn't necessarily need to be this adult or several adults be like, no, like all of that has gone away. Like kids don't get on their bike and just take off anymore. Like a lot of kids I know aren't allowed to leave the house. So there's all these societal things that are pigeonholing, and then we wonder why they don't know what to do. And it's because they've had that option taken away from them since they were 6.
And it's interesting because those same individuals as adults, I train, a good section of my population is in their early 40s, late 30s, early 40s. And you ask them to move in a way that feels good. And they look at you like you are speaking gibberish. Or they'll ask you, you know, well, should I do it this way or this way? And I'll say, well, which one feels better? And just the look.
Mm-hmm. This isn't on me. I'm paying you. Like, you're supposed to tell me which. But that's the idea of flipping the ownership and flipping the responsibility. And that's the thing I think people don't realize they're seeking, is that ownership and responsibility to know what to do. And this is why they're like, no, again, I'm going to outsource it. Like this person is going to. But again, the golden rule is ideally we want to put ourselves out of work. So and trust the person to be autonomous in their own way. But you know, trusting yourself is, I mean, I'll tell the secret right here. Most of the time we're working with people, not most of the time, all the time we're working with people, we're guessing. We're making a guess. We're looking at the result, and then we're able to like manipulate.
Yeah, totally. Move. One of my clients says it's like, 'cause she has her PhD in biochemistry, and she's funny. She's like, I feel like your work is a giant lab experiment. And like, this is very accurate, because that's totally
And all you do is like, is note trends. And I think of Darian and his little like Philodex of like, I've seen that before, you know, when you look at a certain, and so this is why I think we look at the problem people, because we're like, oh, this is going to add another index card because I am recognizing a problem. I'm figuring out an efficient way to solve it. And now I'm like, oh, okay, now I have another tool in the toolbox.
Right.
But yeah, it's mad. I mean, this is why, I mean, I don't know how it would ever, you know, unless there's a whole, you know, systematic crash and, you know, everyone's on strike now, but I don't know how it would ever, because all you do is you get n equals 30, n equals 40, n equals 42. Like all you get are these like beings, you get these constant humans to interact with and work with and try to figure out. And like, I don't want to like, and this is the thing, like personally, I don't want to pick up clients. Like I'm fine if I don't have any clients. I mean, they're here and they come and I'll accept them. But like, that's not the fun part for me. I like when they just show up and like roll in and I'm like, oh, okay, we're 5 minutes in and they're not ready to go yet. I want like all it is like, it's just such a beautiful thing to be able to like just mesh bodies and mesh teacher and student and look at different populations and know what you can pick out of it. Like, I think that's what we're doing is we're really trying to recognize and see people and then like reflect, like, this is actually unbiasedly without any like lack of confidence. It's like, this is what I see.
Right.
And going back to like the little task, how do you do that at a 5-year-old, right? When you figure out what when you figure out what like an 8-year-old wants, like, how do you utilize that? And when most of the 8-year-olds want this and this one wants this, like, how do you offer that to them? So really neat stuff. But thank you so much for your thinking and your questioning and your being able to deal with variables. You don't live too far, but I am very, you know, if you're ever wandering through, I'll be like, yeah, let's just take a period, you know, like I know Marlo came in once. I was like, you want to take my 6th period? And I just like again, what will they do with n equals 40? It might be neat to be like, hey, I have a guest teacher today. It was funny though, because I remember when that happened and it was mostly girls. It was mostly like freshman girls. I was like, guys, do you realize who is after the fact that who just taught you is like the most famous pole dancer in the entire world? Like, and they were
that's really funny.
Yeah, but I like to do it after the fact so that they're not, but you know, they were just like, it was fun. So if you ever want that experience, you can pop on by Woodburn and
fun. That'd be a good challenge, actually.
I think so. It would be for both. I think the kids, for you, for me to like watch how it happens, because I just jump in and participate. I'm like, oh, I'm at it. Like, I'm the kid now. Like, I just roll with it. And then if I know certain, like, I will, if there's any kind of miscommunication or like, I don't know this lady, then I'll just like be with them doing it. Is when then it's just kind of that broker of like, we're gonna try this and we're gonna listen to this lady. So it's just kind of fun to take that role as well. But yeah, thank you very much for your time and look forward to more to come.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you, Chris.
Oh, let me actually, I just want to stop.